Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled parent stories. Our first story we'll be reading today, entitled Babysitter is demanding I pay to have her laptop fixed. After that, arrogant teacher threatened to send me to the principal. I obliged. And after that, am I the jerk for calling the police on my fiance? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen has to pay for her own laptop. I'll pay for the laptop, you can pay for the MacBook. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Entitled Babysitter is demanding I pay to have her laptop fixed. I, a single mom of two, hired a babysitter after I started working my new job. I used to do work from home for 2 years. My kids are 8 and 6. The babysitter is 17. She brings her laptop with her to study, which is perfectly okay with me as long as she keeps an eye on the kids. Yesterday I came home and the babysitter showed me that her laptop had been broken by my youngest. I was shocked. I asked how this happened, and she said that she left the laptop in the living room and went to make the kids lunch, but my youngest grabbed it and ran with it until he dropped it and broke the screen. I said that was horrible and apologized to her, but I did state that it was her fault for leaving the laptop within the reach of the kids. She said she thought my kids were old enough to know not to touch other stuff. I explained how they might have thought it belonged to us since it was in our house. She asked if I could pay for it to be fixed, but I refused and insisted it was her problem, not mine. She ranted about having exams soon and not having enough money to get it fixed. We argued, and I had to tell her to go home after she persisted. Later on, I got a call from her dad, basically blaming the whole thing on me and demanding I pay to get the laptop fixed, but I still refused. Now she's refusing to come again unless I pay for her laptop repair, even though I paid her in advance to watch the kids. You're the jerk. A 6 and an 8-year-old are absolutely old enough to know not to touch other people's stuff or run around with it. Signed, a mother of a 6-year-old. You're the jerk. You pay for what your kids destroy. That's part of being a parent. End of story. You're the jerk. It happened in your home and was done by your kid. Pay up. Or maybe she can sue you and get it off your home insurance in small claims court. You're the jerk. Your kid broke it, and it wasn't an accident either. They're also 6 and 8, not 2 and 4. They knew it was an electronic device, and unless you literally have the exact same computer, they knew that it was hers. Not the jerk. Can't believe all these people telling you that you're the jerk in this situation. What if they had gotten hold of something dangerous? If she had been supervising them the way she was being paid to, this never would have happened. If she tries any funny legal business, reach out to me. I'm a family attorney and we'll take your case pro bono, because this would be a situation in which we can definitely countersue due to the fact that she was not babysitting the way she was supposed to be. I once won my client a settlement for $175,000 by countersuing someone who left their pool gate open. Long story short, people who make foolish decisions will be held accountable in a court of law. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the babysitter? Please let us know. I think that lawyer that commented was the biggest jerk of them all. Arrogant teacher threatened to send me to the principal. I obliged. This was over a decade ago, so some details are foggy. Going into senior year of high school at a small rural high school where the smart kids all get sent off to the distance learning building their junior and senior year to take college courses. Junior year, the woman in charge of us in distance learning had been teaching at our school district for over 15 years. She knew us, our families, taught us in multiple grades, and coached about 3/4 of us in track or tennis. Keep in mind, our entire student body, K through 12, wouldn't have broken 500 kids, even if they padded the numbers with voluntary pre-K and GED students. She knew us, our antics, and generally trusted us to get our work done. She made sure we actually watched our classes and didn't get into a bind on our assignments. Outside of that, as long as we were doing something productive and had our main stuff done, our time was ours to use as we saw fit. In my case, it was mostly spent playing guitar and reading up on the playbook for whatever athletic competition I had that week. I was an academically good, but insufferably lazy student. Summer passes. First year of senior year comes around. The teacher we all adored had moved away. Her husband got a job somewhere else that paid big bucks. In her place is some tall, red-haired jerk that none of us had seen before. Turns out he's the new head coach for girls basketball and our new distance learning supervisor. Our college courses didn't start for a couple of weeks, so he spent the entire first day pontificating on how lucky we all were to have him since he had spent the last 10 years in the university world and knew how it worked and would make sure we weren't just slacking off because we were seniors. The fact that he went from university to high school should have been a red flag to the people that hired him. Whatever. A couple of weeks go by of this coach, we'll call him Bob, making us do pointless practice assignments like writing a paper on respect in APA format or researching a new car for his wife while citing our sources, all under the guise of making sure we were prepared. The students all politely informed him that these courses were through a community college and were generally no more difficult than a normal AP high school class, except for the STEM courses. Fast forward 2 weeks and courses start. Finally, we thought. Bob's antics throughout the year would have been bearable had he not made a habit of insulting students who did something that wasn't to his liking, or held a political view contrary to the university culture he came from, which was all of us. He went to demanding that we all submit our assignments to him before our actual professors, which he then did not go through quickly, causing a great many of us to lose points for late assignments. We started ignoring this and sending him a copy at the same time we submitted the assignment, and telling us all that we were in no way mature enough for this kind of learning. We all had to maintain an institutional GPA of 3.0 or better to stay in the program. We averaged 3.8. And if it was up to him, he'd take our entitled butts right back over to the main building for real classes. The straw that broke the camel's back came at the end of the fall semester. We had all taken our finals, passed, and were looking forward to an easy few weeks. Bob came in that morning in a worse mood than usual. I found out years later this was the day his divorce proceedings began, and started going off on one of the students for how she was dressed. She ignored him, as did the rest of us. We were all just making it through to the end of the semester. Bob then began one of his speeches about how terrible and entitled we all were. No one was paying attention, which made him even more angry, but he knew he couldn't really punish us for anything. So he zeroed in on one kid that had been placed in the classroom for remedial learning as it was a quiet, consistent environment. He was the one student in the room actually working on something. The conversation will be paraphrased as this was over 10 years ago. It went as follows. Bob.
So, what are you doing?
Student, somewhat rudely. I'm trying to study for my test coming up so I don't get held back. Bob.
For what? So you can eventually go flip burgers at the Dairy Queen?
By the way, the student he was talking to now makes over 6 figures as a welder.
Please, you're not going to get it done anyway, so have some respect and pay attention when an adult is speaking.
That was it for me. You see, the student he was talking to happened to be my cousin. I was very familiar with his academic and personal struggles, and I knew how hard he was working to straighten up. Our family is a rather well-known and affluent one in our community, and this student was cruelly regarded as a mess-up by some folks outside of our family, despite his overwhelmingly kind disposition. Now, this jerk teacher was insulting the most vulnerable member of our class and my family. It was time to get this guy in the worst way I could think of without doing myself over too or getting arrested. You see, my mother had been teaching for 25 years in the district at that point, and my stepfather is a retired guidance counselor, so I knew the rules. I'd previously refrained from honestly discussing his conduct with my parents because Bob's daughter had actually become part of our friend circle, and I knew how hard life would be on her if her dad lost his job, as his reputation made her life hard enough. The college courses kids also all did theater and athletics together, so she was part of our life. Again, tiny school. Half the varsity offensive line was part of a district-winning production of Flowers for Algernon, and our star running back was also a regional qualifier in robotics. But she was graduating with the rest of us and going to school out of state, so collateral damage would be minimal. Knowing what would happen next, I casually remarked, "Coach Bob, it seems to me that if you knew half as much about basketball as you think you know about this student, you'd probably still have your job at the university. Or you would have got your contract renewed for another year at the last school board meeting. Where will you go after the school year ends?" The room went dead quiet. That info wasn't in the newspaper yet. Bob's face turned an absolutely vibrant shade of red. His voice shaking, he tells me,
"Outside, now!"
I calmly set down my book and stepped out into the foyer of the building. Bob followed me out, closed the door, and proceeded to scream every insult and word he could think of in my face for at least 4 straight minutes. I was the most smug, lazy, entitled little jerk he had ever seen, apparently. I may have been able to pull the wool over the eyes of my pastor, every other teacher, his daughter, and all of my coaches, who were constantly irritated with me for being lazy. But goodness, I couldn't fool him. I was never going anywhere in life, and I was just going to ride my family name like a parasite. To be honest, his lung capacity was kind of impressive. I don't think he took a single breath for the entirety of his rant. Once he stopped to catch his breath, I asked, "Coach Bob, may I go back to reading now?" Bob screamed,
No! Your butt is going straight to the principal. The student and I will write down exactly what you said, and you will sign the darn thing. Do you understand?
"Yes, sir. I'd be happy to sign it." Bob gave me a questioning gaze. "Actually, I'd be happy to go down to the principal's office. I need to ask him for a letter of recommendation for a scholarship. And of course, he will ask me what led to me saying something so disrespectful. Of course, I can't lie to him, and then I'll mention our little chat out here." By this point, the teacher in the other classroom, who I also happen to be related to, came out to see what the commotion was and heard at least the tail end of his glorious speech. She was about to say something, but I turned and gave her a smile and a wink. I had it in the bag. 18-year-old me was riding high. Bob sent me back into the distance learning room and followed me in. I stood by the door, awaiting my office referral. A minute went by and it never came.
Sit down, Jones.
"Coach Bob, I believe classroom insubordination requires an office referral."
If that's the way you want to go.
Bob's voice started to raise, but at this point, he understood his situation. He wrote up the office referral, and I walked happily down to the admin office. The principal was surprised to see me, and even more surprised that I was sent there on disciplinary action. I told him what had happened, and I got detention for 1 day as punishment for open disrespect of a teacher, which I kind of deserved, and a thank you for my honesty. The next 2 weeks were heavenly. Bob barely spoke a word and spent most of his time glaring at me or looking at job listings. At the start of the spring semester, he wasn't in distance learning. In fact, he was nowhere to be seen. Turned out, he had accepted a last-minute opportunity somewhere else before the Christmas break and had to move there in time for spring practices to start. What a coincidence. I found out years later that Bob was soon let go from his next coaching job and he had gotten divorced. Other faculty had apparently repeatedly complained about his conduct and he was on incredibly thin ice long before my little stunt. Honestly, I kind of feel sorry for the guy after writing this memory down. Congratulations on everyone who made it to the end. Am I the jerk for calling the police on my fiance? Last night, my 35 male, fiance 38 female, left in the evening to give a friend's son a ride to his home. She implied she'd be home before 9. She left at around 7:45. 10:15 rolled around and she still wasn't home. I texted and she apologized to me, saying that her friend's son was actually in the next town over, maybe 30 minutes away, and she was coming home now. 11:45 rolled around and she still hadn't come home, so I called her to no answer. Texted her, no response. I was getting very upset. 12:30 rolled around and still no response and no answer to my phone calls. I was extremely angry. 1:30 rolled around and my anger had completely transformed into worry. Not answering my calls and texts not read. Around 1:45 I called the police. I've always heard that the first 24 hours of someone being missing is the most important, so I didn't want to delay. I asked them to let me know if there had been any traffic accidents involving her car, and the operator told me that they would put out the word and send some cops to check along the route she would travel. I called all the hospitals in the area to check if she had been checked in, and I waited outside watching the road for her car for 3 hours, partially because I didn't want the kids to hear me on the phone with hospitals, and secondly because I was sick with worry. At 7 a.m. she came home. She apologized for being out and said she had no excuse. She was driving home and felt tired, like she was falling asleep at the wheel, so she pulled over to the side of the road to sleep. When she did that, she found that her brand new phone had stopped working. She says she napped anyway because it was the responsible thing to do, and then came home at 7 a.m. to bring the kids to school and get to work on time. I immediately called the police and told them that she had come home safely and gave them the case number and told them to stop searching, which they did. My fiance brought the kids to school and left for work. I set out to start cleaning. Cleaning de-stresses me sometimes, and I got a call from a policeman asking me where she worked. I told him and asked why, and I was informed that it was their policy to check on the person's wellness after a missing person is found. I asked them to not go by her work, but to give her a call instead. He said he couldn't promise anything. My fiance is relatively new to her job. A police officer showed up and asked to speak with her. She's now enraged at me for calling the police and sending a cop to her work and making her look bad. She's saying I overreacted and that she wasn't missing and that I was punishing her for doing the responsible thing and not driving while drowsy. She's saying that she is never going to leave the house again except for work because she's afraid I'm going to call the cops on her again. So, did I overreact? Should I have waited 2 days like she's saying I should have? Not the jerk, but you know she's lying, right? OP. I do suspect that her story isn't truthful, but she doesn't really have a history of lying to me, so I've been trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. No. Her whole story is a big fat lie. She told you she would be home by 9, but somehow was wrong about where the kid lived? Did she not know the town beforehand? Did she just start driving 30 minutes and then the kid goes, "Oh, no, wait, I actually live in XYZ"? That part of the story doesn't even make sense. So she ended up changing the time. Then she got tired and pulled over and napped on the side of the road? You do realize that if she had been napping in her car like she claims, the police would have found her, right? And then her new phone just happened to not be working, despite the fact that that simply does not happen, and even if it wasn't working properly, she still could have called 911. That's not even mentioning the fact that I don't know a single woman, myself included, who would pull over on the side of the road and sleep in her car with no phone. You said in another comment that this isn't the first time she's been gone longer than the errand would take. You're being conditioned to not ask questions and to accept whatever answer she feeds you. Good liars do this. Good liars don't start with the big lie, they start small, and when you believe that, they build on it. And if you do ask questions, they treat you as if you are the unreasonable person. They question your questioning. Your fiance is a good liar. Of course you believe her. She set you up for it. Not the jerk. She said she was on her way home at 10:15 p.m. and then disappeared until 7 a.m. Of course you were going to call the police and have them go looking for her. If she had been in an accident or worse, it would have been horrible if you'd waited 2 days to call. That being said, she's definitely lying about what happened. It honestly sounds more like she fell asleep at her affair partner's place and concocted that bogus excuse to cover herself. Am I the jerk for lying about a food allergy? I'm vegan, have been for over 5 years. I'm lucky to live in a major city with a plethora of entirely or partially vegan restaurants, but when I visit my family in rural Pennsylvania, my options become non-existent. Attitudes towards veganism here range from ignorance to outright hostility. I try to avoid going out to eat with my family when I'm home at all costs, but sometimes it simply isn't avoidable. For example, my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner. My sister had her dinner at the foremost fine dining establishment in this town. It's a big old tavern that bills itself as a French-influenced steakhouse. Menu fare is every imaginable cut of steak drowned in butter, with some chicken and fish drowned in butter, plus sides of veggies and mashed potatoes that are, yes, smothered in butter. The 1 or 2 vegetarian dishes are buttered and drowned in creamy sauce. Given that my little brother used to wait tables here, I know that they frown upon substitutions and don't use much veggie oil for the sake of quality. I've had 2 negative experiences here too. I tried to explain my vegan diet my first time here in depth, yet my sad little plate of steamed broccoli was drizzled with butter and my iceberg lettuce salad came with ranch. The second time, a chef came out personally and promised me that his tomato pasta dish was vegan, only for me to find out they had swirled Parmesan cheese into the red sauce to disguise that they had accidentally sprinkled it on top. That incident broke my trust completely. For my sister's dinner, I called ahead and told the chef that I have life-threatening food allergies to meat proteins, dairy, including butter, and egg. Finally, they took me seriously. I was served a dish of plain pasta with salt and pepper with fruit, which sucked, but I appreciated the consideration. For those allergies, though, they had to scrub down the entire kitchen, clean the fryers, check the ingredients list of their products, etc. That prep apparently cost them an extra 2 hours, and, I didn't realize this, they charged my parents, who are paying for the rehearsal, an extra several $100s for their time. My sister and parents are livid. I already sent my mom the several hundred needed to cover the extra cost, but they're upset at me for lying and humiliating the chef and restaurant, whom they have close ties to. My sister's wedding is this weekend, and something tells me that it's going to be tense. Personally, I think that if this restaurant is going to continue with their ignorance and inconsideration, they got what they deserve. Am I the jerk for ensuring my needs are met? You're the jerk. Hi, I'm someone with an actual food allergy, lactose, and potentially gluten. Please don't use a condition that can be life-threatening to make your life easier. Also, you make their job 10 times harder. You're the jerk. Fellow person with food allergies here. OP is the exact reason restaurants don't take me seriously when I say, "No tomatoes, please, I'm allergic." And when it comes out with, they say to just take them off. No. Does anaphylaxis mean anything to them? No, because of people like OP. You're the jerk. And this really got me. Personally, I think that if this restaurant is going to continue with their ignorance and inconsideration, they got what they deserved. This sort of attitude is what makes many people not be able to stand vegans. It's a steakhouse in an area where you admitted that veganism isn't considered a big thing. They probably don't have easy means to make a vegan meal and don't get many requests like this. You even said when they tried it wasn't that great. Since you've had previous issues with this place, you could have called them in advance and been really blunt about what you can and can't eat and ask if they can't accommodate you, but if you can bring your own food, as this is for your sister's rehearsal dinner. Lying wasn't the way to go about it at all. Not the jerk. I don't think it's so crazy you wanted a vegan option when you're a vegan. Not to mention, you've already had a bad experience trying to get a vegan meal there. It's kind of inconsiderate of your family to have not thought about you at all and made sure there was a vegan option. You covered the cost too after finding out. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. This reminds me of a joke. So one time a vegan walks into a steakhouse. Am I the jerk for evicting my nephew and niece from my apartment? I, male 38, let my nephew, Nick, who's 20, and his sister, Sadie, who's 18, live in my old apartment to stay at rent-free and focus on college. This isn't a new thing because I've always been close to them and helped them and their parents, my brother and his deceased wife, a lot. This situation started when my wife and I found out that my wife's pre-existing health issues had made her become infertile. This was so devastating for the whole family, not just us. My wife told me about a series of calls she received via our landline. She said the caller would just play a recording of baby noises and phrases like "mama" every single time. We'd get at least 4 to 5 calls a day, and I've listened to the last 2 of them. All had the same baby sounds. We figured it was someone mocking my wife's fertility issues, but didn't know who it was because we've told a lot of people about it. I told my friend about it, and he was able to identify the caller as my nephew Nick, then my niece Sadie. I was in shock, and it took me some time to actually believe what I was told. After it was confirmed, I just had a breakdown and went over to the apartment and confronted them. They denied it till I threatened to evict them. They said they did this as a prank, and it was directed at my wife, not me, and they thought it would get her to laugh or something. I called them idiots, because not only my wife didn't laugh, but she cried her eyes out every time we got those awful prank calls. I told them I want them out of my apartment and gave them eviction papers. They freaked out and started pleading with me until I left. They had my brother call me later to ask about what was going on. I told him, and he started apologizing on their behalf, saying they're just kids that were messing around, not realizing what they were doing. He went on about how evicting them will affect them and him since he's struggling with his own situation. I said I know he's a widower. He's struggling, but my decision will stand. He started begging me to let it go and promised to have Nick and Sadie grovel with apologies, but I refused. Now my parents got involved, saying the kid's dad is choosing to have nothing to do with them if they get evicted, and said that the kids look up to me and I shouldn't let what happened ruin the relationship we have. Not the jerk. Sorry, any reasonable 18 and 20-year-olds would know this was not a funny prank. They do not get to live rent-free in your space while simultaneously being cruel to your wife. If it was supposed to make her feel better, they wouldn't hide behind anonymity. They were cruel and feel bad now because they were caught and need to face the consequences, and not because they see what they did was wrong. Neighbor thinks he's entitled to take our fence down. I rent a house with my sister and brother-in-law, as well as my hubby and kids. At the time of this, I only had the one kid, and it's only my sister and I in this story. The neighbor isn't so much of a neighbor, but a guy who bought the house next door, tore it down, and built 2 of those skinny houses. I can't remember what they're called. Property investors, developers, I have no idea. It was summer, so my sister and I were out in our backyard with my daughter playing around when this guy pops his head over the fence and asks if we can talk. I don't like talking to people, so my sister went up to him to see what was up. Guy: "Hey, I'm so-and-so. Do you live here?" Sister: "Yes, we do." "Great. I own these 2 houses next door, and I'm trying to get them ready to put on the market. I have guys coming to build a fence, and I was hoping you'd be okay with me having them rebuild this side of your fence as well. I'll cover the costs of everything. Sister, that sounds great, but unfortunately, we don't own the place, we rent, so you'll have to call my landlord. I can give you his info. Guy, looking slightly frustrated. Okay. My sister gives him our landlord's number and he leaves. We send off a quick text to our landlord to let him know what happened and that someone would be calling him about the fence. Landlord was game, as he didn't have to pay for anything, but had a feeling the guy would want to change the fence style, so definitely wanted to talk to him about it. A little over a week later, it was morning. I let my dogs out and went to make my daughter breakfast. I was about to start when the doorbell rang. There was a guy dressed in construction gear. I opened the door, and before I can say hello, he goes, "Construction dude."
You need to get your dogs inside.
Me. And why is that? Construction dude.
Because we're here to take the fence down, and we can't do that with the dogs out there.
Me. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize everything had been all sorted out. No one notified me. Yeah, I'll get them in. I close the door, and as I'm about to head to the back door, a thought crosses my mind that maybe I should confirm everything with my landlord. Well, good thing I did, because he had not received one call from anyone about the fence. Not even a missed call from a number he didn't recognize. Nothing. At this point, my sister was awake, and I had continued to leave my dogs outside. My landlord suggested for the supervisor and asking him to have the guy who hired him call my landlord. I forgot to mention, totally important though, my landlord owns the whole fence. Even though it's technically a shared fence, he's the one who owns it completely. They need my landlord's permission to take it down or face destruction of property charges. I don't even have a chance to finish writing my landlord's number down before there's another knock on my door. My sister answers this time. Construction dude.
You need to get the dogs inside.
Sister, you need permission to be here. My landlord just informed us that he had no idea anyone was coming to take the fence down today or any day, which is pretty concerning since he's the one that owns the fence. Construction dude.
I don't know anything about that.
Sister, I get that. That's why I need to talk to the supervisor. I can give him landlord's number and we can get all of this cleared up. My sister then goes to talk to the supervisor. I stayed inside with my daughter, dog still outside. My sister comes back and says the supervisor was going to call the guy who owns the houses to get him to call our landlord. About 20 minutes go by when construction dude comes back.
Everything has been cleared up. Could you get the dogs in now?
Sister, yes, we can.
Thank you.
I let the dogs in and my sister and I go about our day. I should have called my landlord to confirm a second time. About an hour later, I get a text from my landlord. Landlord, hey, no one's called me yet. Are the construction guys still there? When I tell you my heart was in my stomach and throat all at the same time, I quickly call him. Me. Oh my gosh. You need to get down here. I'm so sorry. The construction dude came to the door and said they worked everything out with you and were given the go-ahead to start working. I should have called you again, but I didn't even think. I'm so sorry, so sorry. Landlord. Whoa, it's okay. It's not your fault. You shouldn't even have to be dealing with any of this. The guy should have called me as soon as you said you didn't own the place. Can you do me a favor though? Go see how much of the fence they tore down and take pictures, please. Me. Yeah, I can do that. Landlord. Awesome. Send them to me as soon as you have the pictures. I'm on my way. I then go out back to have a smoke and pretend I'm playing on my phone while getting pictures. They had already taken down the majority of the fence, and the only parts left was the frame about halfway down. I sent the pictures off to my landlord, then went inside to wait till he got there. Now, reader, if you haven't already figured out, my landlord is a super calm guy. He knows his laws and knew this was going to go his way no matter how it played out. When he got to the house, he walked up to the supervisor with a smile on his face. Everything that follows was told to me by landlord after he was done talking. I'm trying to remember this as best I can. So landlord went to the supervisor. Landlord. Hey, I'm C. I own this house here, and this happens to be my fence you're currently tearing apart. Supervisor. Eyes go a bit wide. Oh, we had permission to... Landlord. No, you had permission from no one. No one with the authority to give you permission anyway. I also know for a fact my tenant told you that you needed to have your client call me. Supervisor. I called him, and he said he didn't need to do that, and that everything was good to go. He's already had your permission. Landlord. Then I suggest you call him up for me, please. Supervisor calls the guy and explains that my landlord was there and wanted to talk to him. Landlord. Hey there, it's C. I'm the guy that owns the house that you're currently destroying the fence off. I'm just wondering why you thought you had permission to tear apart my fence. Guy.
Oh, I didn't realize the house was owned by someone else. The girl I talked to said I could go ahead and replace the fence.
Landlord laughs. No, she didn't. She told you that she didn't own the place and you needed to call me. Even gave you my number. Guy.
Now that's not true.
Landlord. Don't. Just don't. I trust my tenants more than I trust you. So stop with this, and instead, let's talk about the fence. I want my fence back the way it was. Guy.
I was of course going to put the fence back. I was going to change the style a bit. Is that all right?
Landlord. No, it's not. Had you called me, you and I could have worked out a new style of fence. All I would have asked is that you at least look similar to the rest of my fence. Now, if you want a new fence, you can pay to have my whole fence replaced to look the same. Guy.
Okay, I'll have the fence redone the way it was.
Landlord. Sounds great. Also, don't forget, the nice side faces me. We all then had a good laugh about how everything played out. Before leaving, my landlord asked if we needed them to do anything to make all this easier on us, since we were the ones living here. We asked that he have them bring in a temporary fence so that we could still let the dogs out. Landlord said he would make sure they brought one in at the expense of the guy, of course. You may think this is the end, but it's not. A temporary fence was brought in, essentially these huge metal panels held together by a metal connector at the bottom and zip ties. We didn't care, it worked. They built the fence, but they left a huge gap between the sidewalk in the backyard and the fence, about a foot deep and wide enough that I could fit my whole leg in it, no problem. They also left the temporary fence for 2 weeks until my dad took it apart and heaved it over the fence. Also, my front gate had to be taken apart, and instead of building it the way it was originally, it was connected to fence, went as wide as sidewalk, but then another little bit of fence was built to connect it to the house. Instead, they built me a barn door instead of a gate. So heavy that it leans, so I have to lift it every time I go to open it, or else it's hard to get it unlocked. I also don't have sidewalk where the new lock was. It dipped down into a rock bed where I would be too short to even reach the lock. Called my landlord, and he had the guy have the workers come back twice, once to pack the gap they left behind, and then the second time so they could add paving stones to the rock bed so that I could reach the lock. Again, this was all done on the guy's dime, and when he tried to complain about it, my landlord reminded him that this could have gone a whole other way and be costing him a lot more money. Also, that he could make him have them rebuild the gate to the original instead of just fixing the problems they created. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.